Today we're going to show you how to mount your scope to your rifle. First thing you want to do is keep safety in mind and make sure your rifle is unloaded. Next step is to make sure your rifle, your scope, and your mounting hardware are compatible with each other. Obviously you don't want to mount a 50 caliber scope on a squirrel rifle. Next, be sure your bases and rings are right for the job. Bases need to fit to receiver and the ring should be high enough to provide clearance without being too high. Be sure to have the right base in the right position. Often the receiver rings and the receiver bridge base are different heights. Apply a removable thread locker to the base screws. Using a torque wrench, tighten the base screws, alternating among the screws until you tighten them according to your manufacturer's recommended specifications. Make sure the rings are the right height and make sure the diameter of the rings match the diameter of the scope that you are mounting. You won't get too far trying to mount a 34mm scope in a 1-inch ring. You want a ring height that keeps the scope as low as possible while still allowing reliable operation. Mount the rings in the bases. Be sure the ring is centered in the base. Install an aligned pin in each ring. The points should face each other. If the points align, the rings are square. If they're not, you'll need to align them according to the manufacturer's specifications. While you go right ahead and install the scope at this point, you'll get better results if you lap the rings. Lapping is an abrasive process that smooths the interior of the ring so they grip the scope more evenly. Put a small amount of lapping compound on the lapping bar and move it around on the inside of the rings. You only want to remove enough material to make the rings smooth, so don't get carried away here. Clean the rings to remove any abrasive before installing the scope. Remove the top half of the rings and position the scope in the saddles. This is the point at which you want to make sure you're installing the scope with proper eye relief. You want it to be comfortable to see through, but you don't want the scope rings bearing down on any part of the scope other than the tube. Once you're happy with the scope position, replace the top half of the rings and secure them lightly. Next, you'll need to square the scope's reticle to the bore. This is done for years by eyeballing, but you can take this guesswork out of the process by using a pair of magnetized levels. Position one on the flat spot on the receiver. Place the other on the scope's elevation turret or some other convenient flat spot. The key is make sure it's flat. When the bubbles of both levels are centered, the scope is square to the rifle. Using a torque wrench, tighten the ring screws. Alternate among the screws so the top half of the ring isn't tilted. You should see a slight gap in between the ring halves on either side. If they're touching, simply loosen the screws on that side and then tighten them according to the manufacturer's specifications. If you followed all the instructions, the reticle of your scope is now aligned with the bore of your rifle. Now you should be able to look through this scope comfortably.